All right, folks, welcome to another edition of Manufacturing Growth Talks. I'm your host, Dan Burgos, and I've got with me a veteran from the manufacturing sector. He's been an executive in several different industries, and I think he'll bring a lot of insights that you all will appreciate. So I'll introduce you to Mitch Zucker. Mitch, welcome.
Thanks, Dan, for having me. I appreciate it. You do really good work. I'm just happy to be a part of this.
Absolutely, and I appreciate you making time and joining me in this conversation. So, Mitch, for those that are tuning in or listening that don't know who you are, what your background is, can you briefly share, what's been your story so far?
Sure. I'm willing to bet that everybody that's watching this has never heard of me. So I think everybody's going to need a little runway. So I started off my career in Silicon Valley working for KLA. And I got let me start education-wise. I got my bachelor's degree from DeVry in electronic engineering technology. And then a number of years later, while working at KLA, I got my master's of business administration from Santa Clara University. I started off my career at KLA Instruments, and I was really, really fortunate to be there at the time that I was. The company was making the transition from small kind of startup, everybody knows each other, managing by spreadsheet, into a real mature company. And I was thinking about the time that I spent there, and the reason that I was so fortunate is because of just the talent and skill that was there at KLA throughout the entire organization, from the executives down to individual contributors. KLA had the unique talent of attracting really, really smart people with very strong work ethics. And when I was in there, I was a good engineer, but there's guys that were brilliant. And they were smarter than me, and so usually I wasn't always the smartest guy in the room, but I could usually finish first by outworking people. And I found myself in this situation where there were really, really smart people with really strong work ethics, so I couldn't outsmart them and I couldn't outwork them. And so I needed to figure out a way, how can I be successful in this company, because I really love the company. And it turns out that I care about people, and I can communicate, and I can get people to work together that, maybe there's some friction or some problems there. And that was my niche. And so I moved into, out of an individual contributor as an engineer into a supervisor, and then manager and director and so on. And I remember my first role as a supervisor, I had really good examples, through my work history of really good people to work for and people who maybe weren't great managers. And I was like, I can do this job. It's not that hard. And this guy messes it up. I could totally do better. And then on day one of me being a supervisor, I was like, holy cow, this is harder than it looks, right? It's totally different being a passenger versus being in the driver's seat.
Different skill.
And I was like, I don't want to be a bad manager. I don't want to be that guy. So I started studying everything that I could on leadership and management and communication. And KLA had this great organization within HR. They had a learning center, and they offered all kinds of training and courses to anybody who wanted it. And I took everything and anything that I could, and it really helped me realize that continuous improvement is the key. And I found myself in manufacturing roles. So there, continuous improvement is it's kind of a way of life of how we do things. Right. But it's also I got to make myself better. And at KLA, I hired people and had people working for me that were really, really good, right? Smarter than me, strong work ethics, ambitious. And I was like, man, I could wind up working for these folks. So I better treat them well, was the first thing. Second thing was, I got to leverage their skills and talents, because that's how, I can be successful. So I have to grow and develop them. And I got to stay one step ahead of them. I wouldn't mind working for them, but that wasn't my intention, right?
So of course.
I wanted us all to rise at the same time.
can I
Yeah.
say something? I want to capture something you said. You said earlier something about caring for people, and it caught my attention because I just got off a phone call with someone, and they said one of our main values is care for people, and I think in our industry that is something that is not predominantly abundant. And I think that's worth mentioning that that's how you engage people. I mean, I think the fact, I don't know if that was your driver, but because you wanted to serve people well, because you want to care for them, motivated you to say, I'm not where I need to be effective. So I need to work at it so I can be effective. And then, second, the fact that you recognize that I could work for those people, I think brings out humility or humbleness from your perspective, because not everybody's willing to admit this person is better than me in terms of their professional work ethic or abilities and so on and so forth. So kudos to you. I think that message should be echoed and resonated in our industry because I think there's there's a need, a bigger need for that.
Yeah, I do have a heart for people. I do care for people. And, every relationship that I have, I'm very intentional about building it on mutual trust and respect. And we demonstrate like our integrity, not through what we say, but what we do. And people intuitively, they will listen to what we say and they'll watch what we do. And if what we say and what we do don't match up, then, their spidey senses are telling and they're like, hey, something's not right here. I can't trust this person. But when they know like your words and your actions are in alignment, it builds that trust, you earn that respect, and it goes both ways. And as a leader, oftentimes we have to extend the trust and the respect before we earn it from other people. Like somebody has to go first. And oftentimes it's the leader. So at my previous company, we built gas analyzers that detected greenhouse gases. Great technology, great company. When I first joined there, manufacturing was a hot mess, and not any fault of the people per se, but just through actions and inactions over years, like things kind of built up. And so business was going really well, but they were constrained on manufacturing. And so they brought me in to go and help out and remove the bottlenecks and increase the output, improve yield, and shrink lead times and backlog and all that.
Sure.
So in the beginning, when I first got there, like I had to learn the product, I had to learn the people. And so oftentimes when you're in a time of crisis and you have problems, you have to work your way out of it. It's just good old fashioned roll up your sleeves and do what you're doing, but do it longer and do it harder while you figure out where the problems are and then where you have to apply pressure and solve those problems to relieve it.
Can I ask you a question though about the situation? So you described it quite well. What about the lay of the land with the people? Like, did you have like already a strong team around you? Did you have a healthy culture around you? Or how was that like? Was it messy? What was that like?
Yeah, it was messy. So the people individually were good. There was a culture, but it wasn't a culture that was designed and implemented on purpose. And so like every organization, family, business, company, country, doesn't matter, has a culture. And if you're intentional about the culture that you want, where you define what you want and then you take the steps to build it, and then you have to maintain it, then you get the culture you want. If you don't do it on purpose, or if you do, but you don't maintain it, it's going to devolve to its lowest common denominator, which is pretty much everybody looking out for themselves, right? It's kind of human nature. So, and when I came in, there were some people that were good, that had upside potential, that were looking for change and looking, for strong leadership. Some people were like, they didn't care. And some people were like, hey, I don't want to change at all. So it was difficult in the beginning. And so we were in a situation where like we needed people to work on Saturday, right? We needed them to work overtime. And so I went to my management staff and I said, look, we're in crunch time. Let's put in some extra effort, because they weren't working overtime. And I said, it was like a Tuesday. And I said, let's ask people for volunteers to work on Saturday. And, as I looked around the room, I saw a lot of looking down and head shaking and like,
Oh,
right.
no.
And I sensed like they didn't want to have the conversation. And so I said, would it be helpful if you got the team together and I was the one who asked? And you could like feel the
Oh,
mood lighten.
oh, so you were talking about your leadership team, not the workers. Oh, okay. I
Correct.
thought you were with the workers already. Okay, got it.
No, it was my management team. Like they didn't want to go and ask their folks to work on Saturday.
Did you know why?
I don't know why, but
Okay.
there was some friction there. And just a quick side note, oftentimes I don't care about the intention. I just care about the action. So some people could have the right intention and act the wrong way, or have the wrong intention and act the right way. It's really like how we show up and what we do that's really important. So I asked them, would it be helpful if I asked people to come in? And they're like, oh yeah, please. So we got the team together, and there was probably 35 people, 40 people, something like that. And I said, look, here's the situation, right? We're about halfway through the quarter. I don't think we're going to make it unless we do something different. We need to increase our effort. I'm asking for volunteers to come in on Saturday. And I said, if you can't, you have something planned, you have your wedding anniversary or a kid's party, or you're just taking the day off, whatever, that's fine. This is voluntary, and nothing bad is going to happen if you don't show up. But if you are willing and you can, we'd appreciate if folks would show up. The shift starts at 6 a.m., right, Monday through Friday. And so they're going to start at 6 a.m. on Saturday. So Saturday, I go in the office at 6 a.m. and I'm holding the door open, and people are looking at me and they said, well, what are you doing here? And I said, well, you're working, I'm working. I'm like, I got a lot of work to do. I said, so you do your job, I'll do mine. And there was probably maybe 7 or 8 people that showed up. And our office was set up, it was an open concept, right? So nobody had offices, everybody had cubicles. And so like I'm on the floor with everybody else, and you can hear conversations that are going on. So on Monday, I hear, hey, did you hear Mitch was here on Saturday? Oh, Mitch was here at 6 a.m. Man, like the big boss was here, right? The next Saturday, we went from 7 people to 20 people. And I was there Saturday also, right? And so it was just part of like leading by example. And,
Right.
I wasn't saying, hey, look, this is a tough time. This is a crisis. Everyone has to pitch in. And then I'm leaving at 3 o'clock on a Friday and they're coming in on Saturday. And I think it's really important as leaders that we do what we ask people to do. We eat our own cooking. So I never ask somebody to do something that I haven't done, that I'm not already doing, or that I'm not willing to do. And it comes across, and it came to the point where like I didn't have to ask people. Once I defined the culture that I wanted, I didn't have to ask people to do things. And this happened in like pretty much every role that I've had. People would come to me and say, we understand the situation because you communicated it to us. We understand the context. We understand what the commander's intent is. If you don't know what commander's intent is, then let me know. I'll explain it. But
No, please explain it.
okay, so commander's intent comes from the U.S. military. And so before any kind of engagement or battle, the commander would get his team together and say, our intent is to secure this hill. That's the outcome that we want. Now, here's the plans that we're going to do. We're going to have, this team go over here, and they're going to go and secure the bridge. Team is going to go here, and they're going to fly in, parachute in from, behind, and they're going to secure our flank. And everybody's got their plans. Well, no plan survives contact with the enemy. So they know something's going to go wrong. So the team that's supposed to go and secure the bridge, they get there and the bridge is out.
Oh,
and they're like, okay, well, they're not just going to sit there and secure a bridge that doesn't work, because they needed that so that the tanks could go across it. So then they have to improvise and work together and say, okay, how do we get the tanks from here and across this river, right? And so they understand what the commander's intent is, and then they can make adjustments along the way. It's the tactics on how they go and achieve that. And so because people understood the context and commander's intent, over time, they would come to me and say, look, we know what we need to do. We're informing you of what our plan is and letting me know. And then my response is, great, what help do you need from me? How do I make it easier for you? How do I remove barriers or roadblocks for you? Like, how do I make it so that you could be as successful as you can possibly be? And look, I don't want folks thinking like I came to this and was doing this from day one, because you talked about humility, life and work, the universe, whatever you want to say, has humbled me over and over and
Uh,
over again, right? Like every time I start thinking, oh yeah, like I think I'm good at this, I think I got this, whack, right? Something would happen. And look, I made tremendous mistakes. There was a time I was a young manager. I was working a lot of hours. I was working on my MBA at night. So I'm working, 60 hours a week at work, plus I'm doing nights and weekends, going to school. I was tired, and there was a guy who came to me, who worked for me, and he said, Mitch, I want to give you my letter of resignation.
hmm.
And I said, okay, well, tell me more. What's going on? And he said, well, I got an offer from this other company. And I said, okay, well, why do you want to go there? And he said, well, they're paying me more money. And I was like, okay, like I understand that. And he said, there's a role that's higher responsibility than what I have here. And I think there's growth for me. I think I can move into, higher level positions faster than if I stayed here. And I said, okay. I said, great. I wish you luck. And he kind of looked at me and he said, well, aren't you going to try to keep me? And I said, the only thing I can do is give you more money. And you'll be happy with the money at first, but then you'll get used to it. And then the underlying issues are still going to be there. Like you're going to feel like you don't have the opportunities to advance as fast here as if you were at this other company. I said, so the reasons that you said, high level of responsibility right now, faster growth opportunities and more money, I could adjust 2 out of the 3, but the other 2 are still going to be there. So no, I'm not going to. And then I was tired and I was young, and I made the comment of, and I don't like people holding me hostage. Like,
Oh, okay. You
right?
told that to that. That's what you told him?
I did. So all that stuff I said up to that point got totally erased by me saying that statement. And he was offended. And then, I thought about it and I was like, oh, I didn't handle that really well. And then I didn't have the courage at the time to go and grab him and say, hey, look, I misspoke there. That's not really what I meant. I know that wasn't your intention. And so I thought about that a lot, and I changed my approach and how I did things. I'm like, okay, what happened? Like, why did I say that? And I was like, man, I was really tired. And what I should have done was say, hey, this is an important conversation. Let's schedule it for tomorrow, right? When
Mm-hmm.
I've got a little bit more rest or whatever. I didn't have to take care of it in that moment. I was fortunate enough that it was probably 20 years later. I was working at another company, and I see his name on something, and I was like, oh, I wonder if that's the same guy. So I reached out to him and I said, hey, Jose, how you doing? This is Mitch. I'm like, I'm pretty sure we worked together at KLA. And he said, yeah. And I said, hey, would you like to get together for lunch? I'd like to take you out to lunch. And he's like, oh, sure. So we have lunch, and I said, look, I just need to start off and I need to apologize. I said, I don't know if you
Oh,
remember this conversation that we had. And he looked at me dead in the eye and he goes, oh, yeah, I remember. And I said, I was wrong. I'm like, I am so sorry. I'm like, I've thought about that over and over again. I'm like, really, like, it wasn't my intention. And it was a sincere apology. And he was so gracious. And he's like, hey, thanks, no problem. And then like our relationship, we kind of picked up, and I was like, okay, how can I help you? And so he was going through some stuff, just thinking through career wise, and I was helping guide him a little bit. So I feel really fortunate that even though it was 20 years later, I got the opportunity to correct that,
yeah. Wow.
right?
I can't believe you had the presence of mind to remember that and to actually act on that. But I did want to ask you something about something you said earlier. You talked about like when you build that culture that you want to create. I find that in a lot of companies, it's just allowed to happen organically, which is not the right thing to do. Is that been your experience? And then also, I want to hear, can you give some tips like how do you take the first steps to start building that?
Yeah. So I I don't think people recognize how important culture is. Like,
I agree.
I don't know if it was Warren Buffett who said it, uh, but one of the top, thinkers and business people said, um, culture eats strategy for lunch,
Yeah, yeah, I've heard that.
right? And people go, oh yeah, they say it, but they don't understand it. They haven't internalized it and they don't really mean it. And culture is so important because when you get the right people together, you define their roles, you set the standard for them, they have clear outcomes and expectations, and they can work together, you can accomplish phenomenal things. And I've gone into groups where people are like, oh man, you got to fire everybody. Like this team is a disaster. And I come in and I'm like, no, they don't have a culture. They don't have like a unifying force. And because there wasn't a culture, there was infighting, there was bickering, there was like sabotaging other people, there was like quitting in place, right? They were just like completely disengaged. And Dr. Ishak Adiziz has a success formula. And he says, success is a function of external integration divided by internal disintegration. So
Okay.
the denominator is internal disintegration. So that's the infighting, it's the politicking, it's the sabotaging, it's following the letter of the law, not the spirit of the law, infighting, all that stuff. Well, the more time and energy you spend on that, the bigger the denominator. Well, the
Sure.
bigger the denominator, the lower the number, right? So all the time and energy and effort that you put fighting internally is time that you can't take care of your customer, beat your
Yes.
competition. So if you can minimize that infighting, you maximize your success. And it shows up in every area of your life. Like, my wife and I, we've been married 28 years and together 32. And, I love her. She loves me. She's got the patience of a saint because let me tell you, I'm not the easiest person to live with. Uh, but in the beginning, like we had to work out like the internal stuff, right? And like we've never really had major fights. Well, we had three,
Yeah, there you go.
but once we figured out like how to work through the small stuff, then we could spend time on really growing our relationship. Going and doing things where we built these great memories and really kind of built a great life together. So it's the same thing. And the process that I use, there's a book by Blair Singer, and I'm not going to get the title precisely right, but it has code of honor in it. It's like how to build a code of honor. But Blair Singer is the author.
Okay.
It's a good book, and I use that as the foundation. And so what I do is I wait for there to be enough time for the team to work together and for me to observe. And then I ask each person to give just to me their list of like what works well, what doesn't work well, what are the frustrations that they have. And then I take everybody's input and then I aggregate it. And a lot of people will say the same thing, but using different language and different terms.
Right.
But the theme is the same. So, one of them may be, hey, look, I'm constantly getting like these last minute requests from somebody and it makes it a crisis for me and then it blows up my plan and I can't do it. And so I get these things together and usually there's about 17 or 18 like broad categories with the descriptions underneath. And then I get the team together and I said, okay, like, how do we combine these? Like, some of them will naturally pair together. And then I pare down to about 7, right? And high level things. And basically what we say is like, okay, look, here's the thing that frustrates us. So for example, like these last minute surprises, it's really disruptive. So we would say, okay, for our code of honor, one of them is going to be no surprises. And so the code of honor is observable behaviors. Right. And then what I do is I say, okay, like here's a high level, no surprises. And then I define it. What does that mean? And so now there's a clear definition. Right. And then what's an example of what it's like to surprise somebody? And what's an example of it's like not to surprise somebody? And then we go and we communicate this throughout the organization. And we say, look, here's our code of honor, and this is how we're going to show up. This is the culture that we want. And so it could be like teamwork is always one of the core tenets in every team that I built. Like it's just foundational for me. So it could be, never leave a teammate behind, no surprises, continuous improvement. So whatever it is, and then we communicate it. And so people have the high level, like one-liner, they have the definition so that everybody, when we say teamwork, they all are thinking the same thing. And then there's examples to say, this is what it's like to live this out, and this is what it's like not to. And then the other thing is like, this is our code. This is what we're going to live by. These are observable behaviors. And if you see anybody doing these things, acknowledge them. Hey, that was really great. One of our core values is never leave a teammate behind. I saw that, you saw someone was lagging and like you went over to help them out. Or if they're not observing it, then take them in private one-on-one and you say, hey, look, this is our core values. This is our code of honor. And you violated this. Like you surprised me, this last minute thing. And so, and it's for everybody. And so people can call me out as well. So I had a situation where I was running a manufacturing organization, and I had two managers, two of the managers that were working for me. One of them came to me and said, hey, I've got a problem with one of my teammates. And I said, well, what's the issue? And he's like, well, like he came to me and said, hey, this needs to get done. You got to go and do this for me. He's like a last minute surprise. He's like totally threw my plan, off, out of kilter. He's like, I need you to go and talk to him. And we had little cards made up on our badge that had the code of honor on it.
Oh, nice.
And I said, let's look at our code of honor. So we pulled it out and we said, okay, no surprises, never leave a teammate behind, timely feedback. And we had all agreed that if we had feedback, we'd say, hey, are we open to some feedback? And I said, you need to go and talk to him. So the guy who I'm talking to his name is Chris. And Chris is a great guy. He's a Hong Kong Chinese guy. So he's probably 5'7". And at the time, he's probably like 125 pounds soaking wet.
Okay.
Right. And he's talking to Mike, and Mike is this big African-American guy. He's probably 6'4", 260 pounds, massive hands, like massive man, big burly beard, like just physically intimidating. I said, Chris, you gotta go talk to Mike. And I could tell by the look in his eyes, he was like, oh man, this is gonna be tough. And I was like, you gotta go do it. So he does, I follow up with him the next week, and I said, okay, what happened? He said, well, I talked to him and I said, hey, do you have a minute? Can I give you some feedback? And he said, yeah. And he said, hey, can we look at our code of honor? And he pointed to the three things and he said, look, you surprised me on this, and like it caused a problem. And Mike was like, you're absolutely right. He's like, that's my fault. He's like, shouldn't have happened. He's like, here's the context. He's like, it's not an excuse. He's like, what can I do to help? Right? How can I fix the current situation? And what can I do better the next time? And those guys completely worked it out. Right. And like the teamwork and collaboration. And Mike he's such a great guy, right? Like outwardly he's physically intimidating, but he's got the heart the size of a Grand Canyon, just a big teddy bear.
But let me ask you something about that, because I think it's critical for people to learn to do this. Because I think coming up with the values is probably, out of all the tasks, is probably one of the, I guess, more doable or easy to put our arms around. But the part about getting people to buy in, to go own it, to go take action, have the courage, call somebody out. How do you encourage that? Because I think that is probably the bigger challenge.
Yeah, you have to lead by example, right? And I'm very big on making sure I reinforce the culture. So I had a different team, and there was a guy on there who was really good technically. And he would always come in and save the day, right? This last minute fly in, kind of the Superman thing. There's a crisis, He goes and fixes
Hero syndrome, I call it.
Yeah, exactly. And he would get rewarded for it, right? He'd get acknowledged by it publicly. And then I came into the group and I saw what was going on, and he would go and save the day. And then I would pull him aside privately and I said, "Hey, that was really good. Thanks for doing that. That was really awesome." But I didn't praise him in public. What I did praise in public were there's one guy that I had who was really, really good. And he would plan ahead. He would identify a possible problem. He's like, "Hey, this could be a problem." He'd assess the risk, and then he would do things to either mitigate it so that if it did happen, he was prepared and he could minimize the blast radius, or he would just eliminate it so it never happened to begin with. He was the guy that's praising publicly. And so I switched the script.
Sure.
And so instead of acknowledging people for making the diving save, I acknowledged people for identifying the problem and taking action ahead of time, and did that publicly. And it wasn't long before people said, because people want to be successful.
Sure.
It wasn't long before people said, "Okay, if I want to be successful in this organization, I have to identify and eliminate problems before they happen, not wait for it to happen and then put it out." So acknowledging in public.
Right.
There's another example. This is one of my favorites. So every quarter, I get the entire team together and give them an update on what's going on in the business, and then I would ask my managers to recognize people like in the team. And so we were building this capital equipment for semiconductor customers, and our system sold between, depending on configuration, between 12 and $40 million a piece. We had two shifts. We had a night shift and a day shift. So the guy was working on the night shift, and he was making an adjustment on the optics bench, and then he had to go and reinitialize, but he left his tooling in there. So when he reinitialized, he crashed this big expensive piece of optics in there, which cost about $350,000. So it happened late at night. Nobody knew. So he went and did as much of the kind of prep work, because he'd have to replace it and all that, as possible. He written the past down. "Hey, this is what happened. Here's what I've done to fix it. Here's what needs to be done in order to get the replacement and pick up where I left off." And then he went home and he got like 2 hours sleep. And then the day shift started at 6 a.m. So he got to work at 5:30, and he waited for his partner who was going to work on the tool so he could talk to him face to face and explain what happened.
Okay.
So I brought him up to the front and I said, "Hey, we want to acknowledge you and reward you." And we gave him like a gift certificate, like $50 gift certificate or whatever. And I said, "Mistakes happen, but how you respond to the event is what really matters. You demonstrated accountability and integrity and ownership. You totally could have passed it off, and the guy could have come in on the day shift, not known that there was a problem. We could have spent weeks trying to, figure out what's going on, but you owned it, you solved it. And even though you destroyed a $350,000 part, you handled it really, really well." And I look up, I'm talking to him, and I look up at everybody seated, and people were like, "This guy's getting recognized for destroying 350,000. And I said, "Well, let's be clear. I don't want you guys destroying stuff, but if it happens, like own it." But like that set the culture. And what it said was, it's okay. We're going to make mistakes, but how you handle it, how you respond will determine, like, do you get reward for this or do you get punished for this?
Hey, let me make a comment there, because I've had similar experiences, and I feel that sometimes leaders get wrapped up in the formality of the company or being the company man. And I think people just want leaders to be people, to be real, to be tangible, and just personable. You said something earlier that just made me think of this story about when people are watching leaders. I've had people test me. They knew I was working on a problem, and the problem I came back and it was fixed. And someone told me, "Oh, thanks so much for fixing that." And I said, "No, that wasn't me." And the guy said, "I know it wasn't you. I'm glad to hear that you don't take credit for other people." So people absolutely want that. And then the other question I did have for you is, have you ever encountered where someone is not quite going with you in terms of the code of honor, the culture, and then how do we spin that around or make a call and cut bait and say, this person's not going to fit in going forward.
Oh yeah, it's happened over and over, and it's going to continue to happen because there are some people that, for whatever reason, don't want to do things the way I want to do them. And I'm the leader, and I'm responsible and accountable for the success of the organization and the success of the company. And I have my way of doing things. And so, look, there are people that like they don't want to be held accountable. If you don't want to be held accountable, you do not want to work with me at all, because we have some difficult conversations. So in situations, right, where people are kind of resisting, I talk to them. Hey, what's going on? I want to make sure there's clear communication, that they understand what it is that we're out to accomplish and what their role is.
That's good.
For people who don't want to support the culture, I have little tolerance. I will ruthlessly defend my culture, and I will take swift and decisive action upon anyone who tries to destroy or harm that culture. It only takes one person to wreak havoc.
I think you're spot on. I have a thing that I say, we have to become more and more, I'll pause for the word, intolerant of people that try to sabotage or do whatever unproductive behavior that, risks the success of the culture. Very, very intolerant. And I think that people are more willing to tolerate that stuff because of either not, I just had a conversation about someone, a CEO that has a hard time confronting people. And unfortunately, as a leader, that just comes with the territory. You have to be able to confront and squash those things as they come up professionally and tactfully and all that good stuff, but nonetheless, swiftly.
Yeah. Look, we get what we tolerate.
100%.
So, and, when you say, hey, look, here's the standard, and we want everyone to work up to that standard, and then you have a person who's not, everybody knows it.
And
right?
but also everybody's watching. Well, how are you going to handle it? Are you going to confront it, or are you going to sweep it under the rug? Proverbial phrase.
That's right. So I had a situation where one of the items on our code of honor was safety, and safety was important. I only have one metric around safety, and it's 100% reporting. That's the only metric.
Okay.
Because I want people to report near misses so that we can do something and prevent something from happening. When something does happen, we want to correct it. But my only metric is 100% reporting. So we had a situation where somebody was willfully not following the build procedure, and we wound up shipping out a couple of units that had a severe safety problem, like a potential safety problem. And so we were able to figure out what was going on. We did the investigation, found out that like it was this person. We talked to him and said, "Hey, what happened?" He's like, "Yeah, I didn't follow the procedure. The procedure is well known to me. I just chose not to do it.
Oh wow.
Because like if I followed the procedure, it was harder for me to do what I needed to do. So I just took the shortcut, and it created the safety problem." And we said, "Great, you no longer work here." And so we fired him on the spot. And when he was walking out, his manager was walking him out. He said, "I knew when this came to light that you guys were going to fire me for this." So he knew, everybody else around knew, and believe me, when people heard, because it was small company, word travels fast. People were like, "Okay, like when we talk about safety, it's not lip service. Like there's real consequences if you're not going to do the right thing."
It's what you said earlier, right? If the words don't match the actions, it's gonna come down crumbling, and people are not gonna believe you. They're not gonna trust you, and it's just gonna be more harm than good across the board. So, man, thank you for sharing so much. Let me, and I know we've taken quite a bit of time. Tell me, I don't know, one principle that you live by, something that people can say, wow, that's a good leadership value or principle that you live by that's helped you be successful.
it's very important for me to maintain my integrity. And so I work really hard to make sure that my words and my actions are in alignment. And it means I've got to be authentic, right? And I've got to be true. And how I show up, I'm the same everywhere I go. So like in this conversation we're having, like if you were to meet me, at a hockey game, I'm the same guy. I'm the same at work as I am at home. And so just, I think knowing who I am, being confident and secure in who I am, and speaking what my truth is, and being a continuous learner, I think is the other piece.
That's great.
Because look, people can sniff out pretty quickly if someone's, kind of blowing smoke, or if they're really like authentic in what they do. And as leaders, we get farther and farther away from the actual work. And our success depends on our team and the individuals in our team, and how they work together and their output. And so in order to get leverage, we need to attract the right people, right, that want to be a part of our culture. We have to be clear on what the outcomes and the deliverables are. We have to be clear on what the metrics are. Because when you have A players love to be graded and scored. A players want to know, what are the rules of the game? How do you score points, and how do you win?
Right.
Because they want to win.
Yes.
If you're not measuring, you're not scoring, and people are okay with it, you don't have A players. So getting those people together, getting them to work together is important. And the best way I found to do that is I just show up as me. And when I make mistakes, I own it, right? And I lead by example. And, I've taken some lumps, right, over the years. I've been humbled, but that's what's worked.
I think what you just said, it's about self-accountability. I think when everybody knows it's black, it's white, it's not gray, it's all about self-accountability and peer accountability, which goes a long, long way. So, is there a book that's been helpful to you that you think people listening to this could benefit from if they want to continue to develop their leadership?
So I think the most influential book, and I've probably purchased over 100 copies and just given them to people, and it's the book I recommend the most. It's The One Thing by Gary Keller.
Nice. Okay.
That's a good book. The other thing is, and Harry Truman said, all leaders are readers, but not all readers are leaders.
I agree 100%.
So, and we live in a great age. I've got a close group of guys that we get together once a month, and we just kind of share life together. And we met last night, and we were talking, and one of the guys said, well, two things you could always count on from Mitch. One is he always knows a guy, and the second is he always has a book recommendation. And we kind of laughed about it, but I've always read my way out of problems. Whenever I've had a problem, I've always gone and searched for a book, because I know that there's somebody that has encountered and solved that problem, and I can take their book, and I'm a slow reader, so in 6 to 8 hours, I can read this and know what works and what doesn't work, and then I can try to apply it to my situation. So my advice to folks is read. If you're a slow reader and like that's not the format, then get it on audio, but get the information into your head. And that's the first step. The second step is apply what you've learned, put it into practice.
Take action, right? So big, so huge. Great advice. Man, so I don't want to take much more of your time. So if people want to get in touch with Mitch, what's the place to go to find you?
You can check me out on LinkedIn. It's Mitch Zucker, or really simple, if they want to send me an email, it's just mitchell.zucker@gmail.com. And my last name is Zucker.
Very nice. Mitch, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate the time. Always thankful of your wisdom and everything you shared. Uh, Thanks again. I appreciate you joining me here.
Yeah, like I want to acknowledge you for what you do. You know, putting this together, it takes time and effort, and you know, a lot of work goes in behind the scenes that a lot of people don't see. So, you know, thank you for doing that. And then, you know, the work that you do in your business. You know, folks who are smart enough to engage with you, they're going to see real, tangible, and lasting results. Right? It's not just going to be, hey, address the symptom. You're going to get to root cause. You're going to solve problems. They're going to go away forever. They're really going to have a massive increase in their business. So if anyone needs help, you're the guy to call without a doubt.
Appreciate that, man. Thanks so much. And maybe we'll do it again some other time to finish the story.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it.
All right.